So I'm going to get into a little bit of coaching education, which a lot of you have seen changes coming from U.S. Soccer and what's going to start happening come 2018. Okay, grassroots coaching education pathways. There's going to be two pathways. There's going to be an online portion, and there's going to be an in-person. Both courses are going to be 4 hours. It's going to be broken down into 11v11, 9v9, 7v7, 4v4. So they're module license courses. So I'm going to get into a few of the frequently asked questions as I go, because those may be some questions that you may have as well. And then the National D license is going to be the developmental license. This is kind of what the pathway is looking like in regards to starting with the grassroots at the bottom and working the way up on the pyramid. And as you can see on your left here, you'll see also the 4v4, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, then the D, and working its way up. So this is what 2018 pathway is going to look like when it comes to coaching education. Key questions that are asked. Will the F and E license still be taught? The answer is no. There will be no F and E license in 2018. Can I still use the national E and D license? The answer is yes. Are the F and D license still good? Yes. What will the coaching requirements be to work with competitive and grassroots teams in 2018? A combination of new modules. Hafi, myself, and Sean Roach, coaching education members, will get together and we will go over a plan and be able to present it in October 2017. So it's still in discussion. Couldn't answer that question right now if somebody were to ask, what are you going to do as far as the mandate? So we couldn't answer that. I couldn't answer that. Is the U.S. Soccer National D license being changed? Yes. The current U.S. Soccer National D license will be updated to flow better through the new modules, to the C. I have sat through some of the courses that UF Soccer has presented. All the courses are going to filter its way up, and it's kind of giving the coach ownership, more responsibility. It invites the instructor doing all the instructing. It kind of throws it back to the coach. And also the grassroots courses. So all the courses are pretty much going to look the same from the 4v4 license all the way to the A license. So really good information. I think U.S. Soccer is going in a good direction, and I'm sure a lot of folks disagree with the 7v7, the build-out line, all the new player development initiatives. But, of course, we all have to adapt. The U.S. Soccer National D license will be the minimum requirement for all coaches who play in the U.S. Youth Soccer National Cup and the California Regional League, the CRL. So those coaches that do not have a D license, I would recommend that they next year start signing up for them, preparing themselves. Because as we know, coaches will wait until, hey, we got to have a D and try to jump into courses. And I'm sure a lot of you have realized if somebody wants to do an E course, the courses are always full. Everyone's trying to get in courses. But they have opened up some new courses for those coaches that have kind of a little bit procrastinated to start the season. Okay, why is U.S. Soccer changing the pathway? With the full implementation of the player development initiative starting this year that most of you are aware of, the 4v4, 7v7, 9v9, and 11v11 with the build-out line, that's why U.S. Soccer is kind of catering to each module. For example, the 7v7 license will be catered to how do you coach your players to learn to coach them for the build-out line? What are the effective tools? So those are things that are going to help them, and it's going to cater to them. The resources for coaching education, you have them all right there. You have Hafi, you have Sean Roach, and you have myself. I would like to pass a couple of things for the grassroots sides as well. I've had the pleasure of going to many of your programs already in my short time here. I've only been on board 4 months. And I've gone out to do clinics for volunteer coaches as well as lectures. For me, reaching those grassroots coaches and mentoring them and teaching them is a plus. Because I look at it, if they become better coaches, then our players become better players. And also they enjoy themselves. And another note that I want to add that next week, if you have not got the email from our state office, that there are webinars starting Monday. Monday at 7 p.m. is Coach the 6 and Under player. Tuesdays, coach the 8 and under player. Wednesday, 10, and Thursdays, 12. Anyone can register for them. It's kind of like letting coaches know who they're coaching, what they should and shouldn't do, and kind of giving them ideas for their training. So they're informative, 35, 40 minutes. They can ask questions while they're online. And also there's a survey to let me know if the information, if they received it, if they liked it, and what they would like changed in the future if they want another webinar. Any questions for me? Yes, ma'am. If they have an E, current E, yes, that's a prerequisite to get to D. For the new modules, that hasn't been established yet for 2018. Yes. Website will be updated as we start rolling and informing everyone. Absolutely. Yes. This coming Monday, 7 p.m. If you go to the CalSouth recreational site, you'll see the times listed, and all they have to do is click on the link, and they can register, and it'll go get an email to join.
Are there going to be videos that will stay up there for somebody that can't?
I'll have videos show. I do plan to record them and put them in the archives with frequently asked questions. Yes. In English. It's first one starting out. Maybe in the future, maybe that's an idea. That do one in Spanish. Okay, if no one else has any other questions, thank you again for coming this evening and for your attention. Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Federation right now, talk a little bit about the National Data Center, how we're going to start getting some more understanding of what's going on through the player base within the Federation, and then a little bit about US Soccer Connect. So a little background on Connect. FIFA mandated back in 2011 that we would start having better understanding of all the players in the world. FIFA wanted to do that. That starts trickling its way down to us. 2015, it became a mandate, and by 2018, our goal is to have it implemented. So what that means is we will be looking to have a clear understanding of all the players in the country at all levels. As you know, our mission is to make soccer the preeminent sport in the United States. And how do we do that? We do that by serving the athlete, as all of you do, and also by serving the fans. When we talk about serving the athlete, we're talking about talking about players, coaches, and referees, all the people on the field that make the game happen every day. When we talk about serving the fan, those are the people who come to our events, who come out to the games, who wear our jerseys, who wear the crest. And it's all of that work, all of that effort that we then turn back so that we can serve the athletes better. And that comes back to the coaching education that we were just talking about, the referee education that we're all working on, and some of the player initiatives that we're also talking about today. How do we do that? We talk about a handful of ways. We want to grow participation. This is why I'm here today, is because all of you are participation in the sport. All of you are the drivers that make this sport run. We want to talk about developing world-class players, coaches, and referees across all those different disciplines, and we want to win World Cups and World Championships. We have to say that we are competitive, and that's something we're going after. So I represent the sport development side and also the member program side. So our sport development, what do we want to do? We want to make it easy to participate in the sport. And I was talking with a couple people earlier about how to make it easy to participate in the sport. And what does it really mean? It means having platforms and ways for people to interact with the game on their terms. It means making it easy for them to find the game when they want to play it. So we operate and manage platforms and programs that help develop players at all levels. Like I said, I'm here representing member programs. CalSouth is one of our most esteemed members, and we're very excited to have the chance to talk to all of you today. But our goal in member programs is to increase alignment within the country and all of our members, getting people playing the game the right way, keep people playing the game in a way that is consistent and allows us to continue to grow. So we talked a little bit about alignment. It has a lot of flavors, but the one we're going to talk a little bit about today is data, which is what I love to do. I'm a business process guy, big change management, big business initiatives guy. So we're looking a lot at building this data ecosystem so we really understand everybody playing the game, and we can talk about their journey of playing soccer here in the United States. So as it stands right now, we're building the National Data Center. So this data center is going to allow us to understand a little bit of information about every player in the country so that we can start tracking how the game is growing. Right now, as sad as it is, we really don't have great numbers on how many players play the game, how long they stay in the game, where we find breakage, and how the game is developing in all of the different pockets and clusters where all of you drive the game. So as we look to build this national data center, we're only bringing in a handful of data elements. And just to give you a little background on the data center, we met with all the leadership of all of our state member organizations a couple months ago. We met with all the technology providers at that same time and really laid out the game plan for how we're going to get there. There's going to be a lot of data interchange, a lot of data moving up the chain from your organizations up to the states, up to us. So there's going to be a lot of data moving. But we are going to be taking a handful of these data elements just so that we can really track how people are doing and how the game is growing. We really want to understand, we want to have the clear data to understand where and when we're seeing breakage in the game. Where do we lose boys? Where do we lose girls? And then we can start really looking at the hows and whys and how do we keep more players in the game and keep players engaged in the game that we all love. And with that, on top of the data center, which is where we will be storing the data and holding on to all of that information, we're also going to be rolling out a complementary registration platform called US Soccer Connect. So when we talk about US Soccer Connect, it's a clear pathway for all of us to get all of our information about our players all the way up through from your local clubs and your local organizations up to the state, and up from the state up to the federation. It's one of the ways that we are looking to do this. In addition, we're also working with all of your incumbent tech partners. So all of your tech partners have been briefed on this, and we've had long, in-depth discussions on how this is going to work, whether you're with our friends from Affinity, if you're with God Soccer, if you're with any of those other platforms. We're working lockstep with all of them to make sure that all of this information is going to be able to flow. So within the US Soccer Connect platform, we are developing a best-in-class registration platform. That registration platform will have all of the tools that you need to run your leagues, your clubs, your competitions. It will have all of those pieces, and we will be building that out to all of the specs that our members have come to the table with. We are driving to make this an easy, simple, great way to engage all of the players, all the way up through the administrators, all the way up through your state associations, and all the way back up to the federation. Like I said, I'm not going to bore you with all of the details inside this, but what Connect is going to do is it will replace most of your registration platforms if you choose to use it. Now, there's no mandate here. What we're doing is we're building something that makes it easy, that will allow all of the systems to connect very well. And that's the biggest thing we're talking about right now, is how do we bring all of the data within soccer to one place so that we can start really understanding the game in a much deeper way that allows us to grow it from a smart way so that we can see the data and we really understand what's going on within the game. So when people are using US Soccer Connect, there will be this strong connectivity between the data, between your platforms, and how it all fits together. Your ability to use your time better is one of the keys that we're driving for. We've spent time out on the road with state associations. We've looked at all of the platforms in the marketplace. We've looked all over to try to understand where are the pain points and what can we do to really make it easier for all of us to run the game we love. Before I jump into a little heavier detail, any questions off the top? Yes, sir. with all the platforms to make sure that they understand this. So we know that it's kind of, there's these multi levels within the business. We've got clubs and leagues, we've got up to your state association. So there's a data exchange at every level. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Who do you share the data with?
The data is just for us to understand how the game is growing. We don't share the data with anybody. And let me flip back a couple. The data we're taking is a very small set. We're really just getting name, date of birth, gender, and zip code. And that's about all we really want. We're taking those data elements just so we can understand where are people playing the game, how old are they, and how long do they stay in the game. We're not going to be doing a marketing campaign. We're not going to go out and talk to, we're not trying to send emails out to your players. That's not what we're about. We want to understand how we can grow the game and how the game is actually growing right now, which we don't have a good grasp on. And I don't want to gloss over. There are a couple other things that we're asking for so that we can manage the ITC process from a FIFA compliance standpoint as well. So we have a handful of other things around country of birth, country of citizenship, have you ever played outside the US? Are other pieces that we need so that we can do all of the FIFA mandated pieces as well. You said you had multiple questions. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So the question was, will this blend in with other information that you want to store as well? You're able to store all the information that you want, just as you do right now. So how you create your registration system and how you collect the information you want, that's yours. We have a minimum set that we need so that we can track kind of the game at that big level, so that we can understand how things are growing all across the game. No, not at all. Absolutely. Any other questions? Yes? Oh.
Let me see if I can take it back. I'm going to take the mic back so that we can.
I'll take it down too.
Yeah. Got it. Who's first?
I have two questions. The first one is, could you explain why you're collecting the country of birth and the citizenship? And then the second question goes to who it gets shared with. Can member organizations get access to the greater data? So at the lower level, so a club have access to the larger macro ecosystem so that they can say, look what we're doing versus what the rest of the country's doing, for example.
Okay, so first question, why are we collecting country of birth or country of citizenship? They're important for us to understand from a FIFA mandate standpoint. So as we go and try to understand whether players can be cleared to play. So this has to go all the way to ITCs and all those types of things that you have to manage when you have players from foreign countries. So we're going to be collecting that on every player so that we can make sure that we're hitting our FIFA goal for that.
Can I follow up on that?
Absolutely.
Will you protect that data?
Absolutely.
So you won't be offering that data to somebody else?
We're not going to offer this data to anybody. So, and to the point that, to this gentleman here, so all the data that you want to collect so that you can manage your side of the game, those are all your choices. We ask for these additional elements so that we can really just manage. Those two in particular are about the FIFA mandate. So we're not planning on sharing this data with anybody. To your other point around sharing the data, what we're looking at in terms of sharing the data is we're still in a little bit of the beginning of that question. Some people have asked, are we going to do a report, a state-by-state report, and publish where all the games are? We don't see any problem in that. So that's something that we're looking at how we're going to handle, and something that we definitely plan on doing. It would all be in the aggregate. We wouldn't be sharing any granular level of data, but of how many players are playing in which state, obviously that's all available to our state, to our member. We're going to give that to them in the granularity that they choose.
Last question.
Of course.
Would you be collecting data on coaches and referees?
We already get a fair amount on coaches through the Digital Coaching Center. So when coaches register to do courses and do their licensing, we already get a similar set of data. So we're able to track their growth and the longitude, how long do they stay in the game. So we're already doing that type of analysis for coaches. We have some of it for referees, but it's going to become more robust over the next handful of months, handful of years. We're going to make that. It won't. I don't think it'll be at the exact same level to do the FIFA, but because the FIFA mandate is really around players. But tracking that and having the data to understand how that growth is happening, why we lose referees and coaches, and really understanding their aspirations so that we can cater to them. You know, some coaches, myself, I coach to coach my daughter. I had no aspiration of becoming a professional coach, and we want to be able to work with coaches in the way that they want to work with us. Yes, sir.
Why should we provide that information to you when you guys are not willing to share the data with us?
We're definitely going to share the data in the aggregate, but to the same point of the privacy of the players across the country, we're not going to give back individual player information to anybody.
But I'm not talking individually, but just in general. You guys are not willing to give any data back or feedback to the state or the association, so why should we take a step further and give you information?
Well, okay, there are a couple pieces to that. So first, we need to meet the FIFA mandate. So that's kind of the first level one is we're supposed to. Right? But in terms of the ability for the Federation to help grow the game across the country, it's imperative that we have this information. In terms of being able to share it back, we will be sharing back at let's say at the state level for sure, where are the players and who's playing in the state. You know, when your state board wants to see that data at a more granular level, they'll have access to that because it's all in their platform. So in terms of sharing data back down within the state, well, as far as I know, the state already knows all that, right? So we're going to be able to pass that. We're trying to build a cohesive data structure so that the data can move up and down the chain and with the right security so that the board here at Cal South can understand how they fit in the greater scheme of the country, but not dig into that lowest level of data. Fair? Okay. Yes, sir.
Where can one read about the FIFA mandate?
The FIFA mandate, I can get you more information on it, but the FIFA mandate came down in 2015 around the ability for them to, there was a mandate to create a FIFA ID for every player in the world is their goal. They want to understand, on the same token, they want to understand the growth of the game across the world. So they've built a platform to do so, and we're following along on that board. I'll connect with you in a second. I'll get your information. I can pass that along. Yes, sir.
Why Blue Star?
Blue Star was an interesting partner. They were really willing to dive in and invest in building something that we were really driving. They've been a tremendously active partner in building it. So the first choice was for them to build the National Data Center. So that they're going to be the ones empowering the technology where we're going to store and capture all this information so we can do our own analytics. And then it became a natural progression when we were looking to build a registration platform to go with them because we've already done that deep dive and that deep learning of them understanding the way that we see the business growing.
Isn't Blue Star what they use for National Cup? Is that their National Cup database for US players?
I don't know that. So I'll tell you, I know for sure that, yeah. Okay. So we use the Blue Star platform for the Development Academy. So and USYS, I don't believe uses any of that platform right now. Yes, sir.
Is it fair to assume that information like this could affect decisions, such as if there's a lack of fields in certain areas by zip code, that this could help make those decisions?
Absolutely. So it's when that's a perfect example of the ways that we can see how the game is growing in clusters, in areas, and absolutely to have the data. And then not only that, but we're going to be able to see this time after time after time. So as you register 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and all of a sudden, if we see this great growth and then it starts to plateau or drop, we'll be able to start seeing all of those macro trends across the country. Yes, sir.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
Right now, you say this is voluntary. How long is it going to be before it's mandatory?
This will be mandatory for the 2018 season. So right now, you're already, I believe, providing all of your information to Cal South. So by the 2018 season, Cal South will be providing that information to us.
Yeah, I know it. Cal South, but how about, is it going to be at the grassroots level mandatory that you give you this information?
That we use your system.
No, by no means is it mandatory that you use our system. So it is, that is a choice. It is, we can talk, I believe it's a compelling system, but by no means is it a mandate that you have to use our system. You will need to get your data to Cal South, and then Cal South will find a way to get their data to us.
The reason I ask is I've been involved with Cal South for 42 years, and things that start off being free end up not being free.
Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, just to be really clear, it's not a mandate. Getting the data from our member Cal South. That mandate lives, and then your ability to transfer your information up to there will come in time too. Of course. Okay.
All done?
Yep. Thank you very much. Oh, one more. Sorry. Yes. Let me connect with you. I don't know it.
And we have about 30 minutes, but I am going to stick around, so if there are things afterwards for questions, I'm happy to answer those later. As kind of an outline, what we're going to talk about is what a concussion is, how we diagnose it, how to appropriately manage it, some common questions that I get regarding concussions, and we're going to focus specifically on soccer, prevention, and then talk about some of the clinical guidelines and state laws. And the return to learn, return to play are things that I do a lot as a physician. Time pending, we may kind of fly through those, and we can talk more about that offline. One of the things with the pathophysiology, just a fancy way of saying what actually happens with a concussion, why I think that's important is because that dictates why we manage it the way we do, and why there's a return to play, and why a player has to sit out for a certain amount of time. And the last thing is what's a normal recovery, if there is kind of such a thing, and why proper management is so important. So I think maybe you all are aware with social media and things and just the news that concussions have gone up. And so the Blue Cross Blue Shield kind of ran their database, and between 2010 and 2015 they saw a skyrocket concussions. And one is that probably with laws and guidelines now that require physician diagnoses, people are actually going to the doctor, so they're diagnosing them. It went up in the fall, and so they said this is probably because of American football, but when you look at statistics, girls soccer is pretty much second to American football, and guys soccer is up there as well. So I would argue that it's probably a combination of a lot of those sports. And most commonly it's in the teens. That's when we see the numbers go up the most. And I think what's most alarming to me, or what's one thing we have to consider, is that post-concussion syndrome, that prolonged recovery, had doubled in that period of time as well. And just make sure I have the pointer here. So this slide just illustrates this up here is where most concussions are diagnosed, and that's mostly in the primary care physician office. Why this is important is all the data that you ever see. If you Wikipedia concussions, and it says 3 million concussions have been diagnosed, that's all from ER visits. So really what this means is that there are a ton more than we even know about, because the real concussion data and where most people are being diagnosed is in a primary care physician office, which is not what's captured when you look at all the data. This does not project well, but this is an x-ray of somebody with a broken collarbone or clavicle. And why I put this up is that I do musculoskeletal medicine in addition to concussion medicine, and I think concussions are the hardest thing to manage, because when you have somebody who falls and hits their shoulder, you get an x-ray, and if it's broken, they have to sit out, and if it's not, and it's painful, depending on their pain tolerance and how old they are, they can play through it. With concussions, we really don't have a definitive test at this point to say, yes, you're concussed, or no, you're not. So it's very difficult. I'm going to take a peek at my watch just so I know where we're at with time. And that's why I think it's so important for all of us to be on the same page, because we're really the ones that are going to be protecting our young athletes, especially when it comes to this. So one thing I want to make sure that I get across is concussions are a brain injury. All right, I'm going to repeat that. Concussions are a brain injury. So even when I was playing, and I still play, I used to kind of say you got a ding or what have you, and that really doesn't exist. Anytime you get concussed, you're injuring your brain. And there's no grading. So even to this day, you'll see on the ticker on ESPN, so-and-so got a mild concussion. That's not accurate. And why we say that is because someone will not have a traumatic mechanism. They kind of got hit in the side of the head, didn't look that bad, and they're the ones that are out for months, and somebody got knocked out cold, and they're back in a week. So there's no real way to grade concussions, and we shouldn't be grading them. The other thing is that you don't have to get hit in the head or the neck to get a concussion. If you get hit hard enough in the abdomen or in the torso, and you kind of have that whiplash mechanism, and you shake your head, that can result in a concussion. The way I look at it is, one analogy is if you think about an egg, right? So the shell is the skull. Oftentimes we don't break the skull or the shell. And the yolk is the brain, and the egg white's kind of the fluid surrounding the brain. So if you shake that egg up, it doesn't matter how you get it shook, it can disrupt that yolk. It can cause a concussion. And then what happens is there's a functional problem. So it's not a problem that you can see. All right, it's not an anatomic problem. It's a problem with the way the neurons in the brain, the connections, the synapses are talking to one another. And I'm going to show you a slide here about what happens. But essentially, we release a bunch of these neurotransmitters and electrons, and calcium goes up, potassium goes up. And what we have to do is we have to have energy to make that back to normal or homeostatic. What's interesting and kind of almost paradoxical is that the blood flow to the brain goes down. And you notice it doesn't return to normal until about 10 days. And this is in animal models, but that's the thing here, is that even if one of our athletes feels better in a day or two, there's still recovery and healing going on, and they're more susceptible to have another concussion at that time. So that's why it's so important that we realize that even if they feel okay early, that they shouldn't be playing for at least a set amount of time. And right now, the earliest that we're doing is about 7 days. Even if you look at NFL, MLS, I mean, you're really not seeing anybody come back sooner than a week, and even that's probably pushing it. Sometimes I'm asked, why don't we do CAT scans on everybody? This is American Medical Society for Sports Medicine, of which I'm a member, and we have a Choosing Wisely campaign. So we say these are things that are best practices for docs. So one thing is we say you don't get a scan for people unless there's something we're more concerned about, like there's a bleed inside or a fracture. And you say, well, why not? Why not just be sure? So CAT scans actually have risk for causing cancer because there's radiation. So especially in our younger athletes, there's an increased risk. So in a 10-year-old, it's about 1 in 5,000 risk for cancer, especially when you're imaging the brain. So you can understand why we shouldn't be imaging people, because we actually could do more harm than good. So hopefully at this point, and this is more for doctors that I educate, we don't image everybody. And just so you all understand why we don't, because I think it's important. MRIs don't have radiation, but they typically don't show injury either, and they're costly and expensive and hard to get. So how do we diagnose a concussion? So for doctors, well, let me ask you this. When you guys are playing on your fields, how often is there a medical personnel, athletic trainer, physician, something? Is there, so very rarely. Couple. It's getting better at the higher levels, right? And San Diego Unified, where I practice, we now have athletic trainers at all the high school events, at all the high schools, and they're usually at American football, and then they try to be at soccer and contact sports. But having pulled that right now, I think it's even more important that you all understand what to look for, because you're going to either be there or transmit this information. So what we do is we use the latest guidelines, which came from Berlin just this past year, and we all kind of get together and come up with these guidelines. So there's a sports concussion assessment tool number 5, and that's what we use. I don't think it's as important to go through the specifics, but the first thing you always do is just make sure that the athlete is stable, meaning you don't need to call 911 right away. They're breathing. They don't seem to have a serious neck injury, right? So that all trumps concussions. Concussions are something that once you've ruled out the really bad stuff, that's when you start evaluating. And these forms, and I want to take a moment, there's a concussion recognition tool, okay? And that is designed for non-medical people to help. They probably don't want to say diagnose concussion because of medical legal stuff, but it's for non-doctors, non-medical people, and you can use that tool to try to help you figure out if somebody's concussed. And it's free, it's readily available, so that is something that's came out of this recent iteration. Physicians use the sports concussion assessment tool. Don't worry about the small print. You're not expected to read it. It's just that it goes through and asks a bunch of questions to see if the athlete's mentating okay. They do a neck exam. We do some balance testing. And at the end, we make a decision, and we say, yes, they're concussed, no, they're not, and here's my reasoning, and there's actually a scoring system. So then when they come into my clinic, I actually can use that to compare if they've done it. And then what I like about it is it has some advice for after the fact about what to do, what not to do, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So you would think at the highest level, like the World Cup, we do a really good job because the cameras are on, physicians are there. Every time we do an international trip, the doctors go with. We stink. This was 2014 World Cup, and what you see is the number of signs of concussion. So a bunch of video people reviewed the World Cup, and they said, these are the number of head collisions, and these players had 2 or 3 signs. They were wobbly, they seemed like they were sometimes knocked unconscious or just seemed to not act right. Out of the 45 times, only 10 got an assessment, and most of the time it was by somebody on the field, another player, a referee. Only 5 times were they actually evaluated even by a physician or someone on the sideline, even only 4 times when it got more severe, and only 2 people were removed for the match, only 1 from the tournament. So there's a disconnect, and this is, again, a little soapbox, and as physicians, we talk amongst this about this, but there's a real problem, I think, in soccer, and so it starts at the grassroots and youth level, in my mind, and I think the most vulnerable are our youth athletes. So that's why it's so important, because they tend to take longer to get better, and they have a higher risk for having worse injuries. So I don't know how many of you remember this play, but the Uruguayan player was kneed in the head I believe an English forward, and he was knocked out. Like, there was no doubt. It made SportsCenter because it was so dramatic. He was out cold for seconds, if not longer. He finally got up, stumbled off. The doctor tried to say, you can't go in. He said, no, 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 looked at his coach. Coach kind of said, all right, and then he went back in the game. Nothing catastrophic happened. He played okay the rest of the match. There's a lot of things to look at about how that went wrong, and things have changed since then where only doctors can really make that decision on that level. Coaches can't overrule the doctors. But why does it matter? So the guy played the rest of the game. Is that okay? He didn't get hurt any worse. So there's been research about this, and especially this is more at teenage level. If you take a player out, they have a much higher rate of recovering within a normal amount of time or a shorter amount of time. They're 9 times more likely to have a prolonged recovery. This is talking about weeks and sometimes even months if they stay in and play. So that's why it's so important that we're taking these athletes out, even if nothing bad happens to the rest of the game, because that may increase their risk of having a prolonged recovery. One thing is that concussions, typically you're going to know right away. You're going to go out there, the athlete's going to have a headache, they're going to say they're dizzy, maybe you see a glazed look in their eyes. But sometimes the symptoms can develop over a period of time. So right away, maybe you're fooled a little bit. And so one phrase or slogan, it's not like my original one, is when in doubt, sit it out. So if you're not sure, it's so much safer to take that athlete out, especially at the youth level. This is another example of how we as medical professionals probably messed up. The German player in the final, I believe, kind of got hit, and it was pretty clear that he was not quite right and unsteady, and he continued to play. And so we're working at it at the medical level, but this is more just for all of us to kind of understand why it's important. So this is a picture from the Olympics in Brazil, and besides showing that I'm taller than everybody else on the team, it also is a reminder for me to talk about how actually each one of you probably is most important in this discussion, because anyone who knows your athletes, knows your kids, you're going to understand when something's not right. And so when I look across that circle, I know that some players act differently than others. Some are goofy, some are more serious. So when you talk to them or you evaluate them, and you're noticing that, Kelly O'Hara is acting very differently, and she may act normal if you didn't know her, but for me who knows her, I'd say that's not right. And so outside of somebody who doesn't really understand that, maybe the referee who's trying to do a good job, if you see something that's not right, I would say it's your responsibility to kind of step in, or at least have that person evaluate it, or just what's the worst is you take them off and just see how they do and evaluate them again. So it's really important to kind of know your players. So prevention and rule changes, what can we do? I always kind of ask these questions is mouth guards, right? So if you put a mouth guard in, a properly fit one, custom made, can you decrease the risk of transmission to the brain? And so does that decrease the risk of concussions? How many say true? Got a couple. How many say false? Most say false. This is not you. This is if we had clickers. All right, headgear for soccer. So this is pretty pertinent. How many people think that if you wear the headband, as Wayne Rooney's doing here, in a match, it decreases the risk for concussion? True? Smattering, okay. And then false? About split there. So the mouth guard thing is really, unfortunately, something that some companies kind of drubbed up. The research for that is really, really shady and shoddy. There's really not good research to say it prevents concussions. It's great for mouth and dental injuries, so should you wear it? I mean, yes, but it doesn't do anything for concussions. And I think the New Orleans Saints may have used a specific brand at one point, and they were touting this as like performance improvement and all this. Science-wise, it protects your mouth, and that's probably about it. Headbands is a little bit more controversial. So Ali Krieger would wear these occasionally. Other players have worn them. There's not great data either way. Some studies have suggested maybe there is a little bit less risk because of how the force is transmitted, and other studies have shown the opposite. So we don't have any great evidence, and there's a theory that if you're wearing something, maybe you're more aggressive, this kind of gladiator model, and so you're going to be more aggressive in going up for the balls. And we're going to show a little bit in a couple slides here where concussions happen, which is why we are even looking at this kind of thing. So when players ask me, I usually tell them that, and if they want to wear it, I don't tell them not to, but I also don't promote it. So this is an interesting slide. This is from a research study that was done in 2015. It looked at many years of high school athletics. And what it found was that this top line here, I don't know how well this transmits. Right here. So that is concussions in girls in competition, which is the highest that you see across those lines, which beats boys in competition, all right? That's practice. So when we talk about the 12 and 13-year-olds and the younger people practicing headers in practice and learning form, there's a very, very low risk for concussions. In games is where we typically see it, okay? And girls have a higher overall risk than guys do, than boys do. Well, there's different reasons for that. So what rule changes have been in place? What are we looking at? So one is that most concussions happen with player-to-player contact. When you're really young, you can get a concussion from heading the ball improperly, and there's neck strength, the way the brain is developing, balls, like how firm they are, many different reasons, but typically it's player-to-player, and with women it's typically head-to-head, with guys it's usually arm or elbow to head. So we should be giving yellow and red cards, and that's kind of been a mandate for dangerous play. Head injury evals during FIFA matches. So supposedly I get 3 minutes on the field to diagnose someone. That typically doesn't happen. It's not necessarily the ref's fault. It's typically just what the players do. They want to go back on, and the athletic trainer or myself, you don't really take that time. And to be honest, if you're playing in front of 40,000 people, are you really going to be able to do an assessment in 3 minutes on the field? Right, I agree. We're nodding no, because I think that's really, really hard. So part of this is, while I care a lot about it, I think it's very difficult, and I think we're kind of set up for issues. I hope it doesn't take a bad outcome to really change this. But that has been at least one positive thing. You all probably know this better than I. Initially, the AYSO came out and said 10 years and younger should not be heading, and then U.S. Soccer came out. And I took a screenshot of your webpage, but you all have adopted that as far as I can tell, which I think is really good. And it's under 11, pretty much no heading, and then you're kind of building up and progressing. Never force a young player. So this kid right here is not ready to head the ball. And as a late bloomer who skipped a grade, when I played against my peers, I was probably much more gangly and not physically mature enough. So it's hard to say everyone's the same, but you can't ask a ref or a coach to say you're physically mature, you're not. So the best we have is kind of age at this point. And the other thing is the proper balls, right? So, and I actually read on your website, you guys are doing that, Nerf balls and other things to start, and make sure that the balls are not super inflated, because if you think about the ball hitting the head, you know, what's going to give, the egg or the ball? And then we go to that analogy. So the balls that are hyperinflated are going to be worse and have a higher risk. So just make sure, even with these heading practices, that the balls are okay. And this was, again, I was just impressed and thought that on the website there's CDC information about the Heads Up campaign and other things that are kind of educating parents, and I think it's mandated for them to sign off that they've read that. And I think that's important, and it goes through a lot of those rule changes that I just discussed. So one thing, I'm a central back. I still play. We have a medical soccer team. We just got back from a tournament in Austria. We played against other doctors in other countries. It was great. You play 6 games in 7 days. So 2 years ago I tore my Achilles, but I'm back about a year later. And yeah, yeah. It's kind of a joke because it's a bunch of people that it's like their third thing they do. So it's mostly about maybe having a beer afterwards, but it's a lot of fun. So I always worry about, because I'm a central back and pretty much I'm tall, and so I head the ball a ton. That's kind of how I survive against the younger, shorter, quicker guys. So I always think about this, is, you know, am I doing damage, or over the course of my career, have I done damage? And as best we can tell at this point, there's no good data that says heading the ball over many years causes you to have brain damage. That may change as we know more, but as of right now, that's the best we can say. Some research has said if you're somebody who heads the ball all the time over many years and you're a professional and you play your whole life, maybe those people are at higher risk. But I think it makes sense for our younger athletes who maybe aren't even ready. That's why to limit that, to me, makes sense. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, all right. Oh, yeah, all right. So one thing we talk about is the student athlete, and I capitalize student because when they come into our clinic, they're in school. So yes, it's about getting them back to soccer, their sport, but part of it is how do we get them back into school? And so there's 2 different kind of almost algorithms and approaches, and I think it's important to understand that because when we mismanage them intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes their school suffers. And I think that is as important as anything else, especially in our youth athletes. So what is recovery? One is they should have no symptoms at rest. So our athletes should say, I feel fine, when they're not doing anything. The other thing, unlike any other sports injury, is that they have to cognitively and physically feel fine when they exert themselves. So when they read or they study or they watch a screen, they should feel fine in addition to when they're running around. Otherwise, they're not recovered because something's still not right. Neuropsych testing is controversial. That's like the computer test that some people do. A lot of the professional leagues do it. We do it in our clinic. Do you have to have that? No. If you do have it, is it useful to compare to the baseline before you were injured? Yes, probably. And we can do it on athletes who have not had a baseline test. It's compared to normative data. So it's an okay thing. It's not mandatory by any means. So return to play. San Diego Unified, we have a form. California Interscholastic Federation has a form. I'm going to show you an example of that, but one thing to keep in mind is there's a state law, and it's on your website, and so I think everybody's aware, that you cannot return sooner than 7 days. Initially, when it came out, I kind of heard talks of people trying to fudge it, so if you got concussed on a Friday, this is more with American football, you could come back that next Friday. I just think that's the wrong approach. It scientifically doesn't make sense. So essentially, you should not be coming back any sooner than a week later. So if you have a weekend match, a weekend tourney, that next weekend you're probably not playing. You should not be playing. And that's after an evaluation by a physician as well. So what it looks like, again, don't worry about the small print, but it's a staged procedure. So you start at stage 1 and you work your way down. And what this does is it gives you a different activity, exercise example, and why you're trying to do it. So you're getting your heart rate up. Then you start incorporating movement, and you keep going and going until finally you're ready for contact practice, which case you see a physician again. We say, yeah, I agree, he or she is good to go, because that's when you're potentially going to get hurt again. So you want to make sure that you're ready to go beforehand. The other thing to understand, I kind of hit on this earlier, is that it's probably most important how long it's been since you've been concussed. So there was a big research study that was done in high school and college. This was American football, but this group did not get another concussion. This group did. They had about the same duration of symptoms, 3 to 4 days. The ones that got a repeat concussion came back in about 6 days. The ones that did not came back in about 10 days. So if you think back to that earlier slide about how things kind of re-regulate, it takes a while. So if you're coming back earlier, you're probably more predisposed, even if you feel great, to get a concussion. So how much rest? So one thing, if you're trying to tell your parents, your athletes, how much rest should you do? So in the past, we used to say, you just rest till you're better. And I'm pretty sure when I did my fellowship at Wake Forest in North Carolina, we almost made someone depressed or anxious because we sat them in a room till they were feeling better and said, you can't go and play your sport, you can't do these things. Athletes thrive on being around other people, they thrive on exercise. We all probably thrive on social connections and networking. So 1 to 2 days, probably 2 days is good. If you extend that, this research study said if you say don't do anything for 5 days, they did worse. They performed the same balance testing and computer testing, but they felt way worse than if they only had 2 days of that. So you don't need to tell your athletes don't do anything at all for more than a couple days. And then at that point, they should probably be seeing a doc anyhow. Again, very busy slide. Don't worry about the specifics. It's just that there's a stage return to learn. So initially, you don't do much of anything. Brain rest, again, this says 3 to 5 days. I would say probably closer to 2. And then you kind of do some stuff at home. Maybe again, easy tasks at home. Drawing, baking and cooking would not be easy for me, but for some people, I guess it's easy. But easy tasks, listening to light music, that kind of stuff at home, and then you gradually progress. So you shouldn't go from doing nothing to going back in and taking like 6 AP classes and tests. That's not smart either. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is post-concussion syndrome, because unfortunately we see a decent amount of that in our sports clinic at UC San Diego. What this means is that youth athletes tend to take 2 to 4 weeks to get better. Adults, we still say about 7 to 10 days. There are some people that fall outside of that curve. And unfortunately, this is out of Philadelphia, I believe, but some people take almost up to a year to get back to all their sport. So when this study, the average was 12 days just to get back to partial school, about a month for school without help, 2 months to be actually symptom-free, and it was taking them 75 days to get back to sport. That is a long time. And these kids, their lives are turned upside down. They can't go to school because they just feel terrible. They can't play their sport. Their parents feel bad. And everyone is just really affected. So can we prevent every single post-concussion syndrome? No. Some people are just predisposed, and we're trying to figure out why. But what we can do is what we talked about earlier. If you see something that you think is concussion, you got to take them out. You got to evaluate them. They shouldn't be playing for at least 7 days. They should be evaluated. Because we know that they're more predisposed to have this if they don't come out. And so what do we do? Like, so say somebody isn't feeling better, probably most people I talk to know someone who like had a concussion and isn't doing well. So we look at these different aspects of it. Some people have vestibular problems. So there's 50% or so of the connections in your brain that deal with your eyes. So a lot of people have problems looking at screens. They get dizzy when they look around, when they're driving, when they go to grocery stores. We look at cognitive. Are they thinking okay? Are they processing things? Some people get migraines afterwards. Anxiety and mood is a big thing with it. And the last thing is neck issues. So we look at all that and we try to figure out how to navigate that system and what's going to help them get better. And we rehab them. So it's not just don't do anything. There's actually therapies for all these things. So, and this is a rookie mistake because I don't think it's projecting well in the light, but my cell phone's the top number and then my email is the thing below. I use Twitter actually a lot for medical information, so I follow a lot of different organizations and kind of see what's coming out, and I retweet a lot of that. So if anybody uses Twitter, I actually do post a lot of concussion information and soccer information. Also, I gave Cindy my business cards and some flyers for our sports concussion clinic, so I'm happy to, if you ever have something come up, I'm always happy to kind of help out as able. Otherwise, I'm good for questions if we have time, otherwise I can stick around after. Thank you very much.
You know, we're very proud of the support that we give to our teams that travel beyond our borders, that earn that right to compete and represent Cal South. And every year we've increased the amount of subsidies that we've provided to those teams to help defray some of the cost. By no means does it cover the entire cost. It covers maybe about half. But if your team competes from your club and earns their right to go to regionals or nationals, we do what we can to help out. So this year was like every other year before, we increased that support. We have implemented the U.S. Soccer Player Development Initiatives on time, as we reported to you for the last 2 years. We listened to the membership and we followed your lead and came forward with implementing on time these requirements. And you know, these requirements, we know that they've required a lot of changes and adjustments from you, and our district commissioners have been working very closely with the membership to try and make those steps easier. We also have our staff at the office that has worked very hard to answer all of your questions and support you along the way. We did the third annual Recreation Tournament of Champions, so that's become a very popular event. I believe this year it was full with a waiting list, and we're looking at expanding that event again next year. The Women's Leadership Committee that we appointed a couple of years ago continued to meet, and they had a request to sponsor some of the women coaches to go to the NSCAA conference, since it was here in Los Angeles. And that request came in from the committee to the board of directors, and the board of directors supported the event, and several of our coaches, I believe there was, 23 women that attended the event that received support from Cal South, women coaches? Something like that. About 23 women coaches attended the event that may not otherwise have done that. So, you know, to Dallery's question earlier, what are you doing for outreach? Well, this is one of the things that we're doing, and I would like to see us do more as far as outreach is concerned. And this would be not just for coaches, but for referees as well. Attending these conferences, hopefully we can help put more women into leadership roles and support them along the way. We had increased support for Top Soccer. We've been very much aware of the need to continue supporting that program. It's one of our, I think it's one of our most important programs, and we're very fortunate to have Sandy Castillo. Sandy, would you stand up, please? Where are you? Come on, stand up. Sandy works tirelessly for this event. She has an outstanding committee, and the board of directors is very supportive. And I believe her budget this year was increased to $70,000, which is still just a small amount of our total budget, but we are definitely there and ready to support that event because it really does great things for our members. And then finally, we and the board of directors and myself have represented Cal South at regional national events. We've all taken on leadership roles where we can in order to try and influence direction both at the U.S. Youth, U.S. Adult, and the U.S. Soccer Federation every chance we get. Our staff and our board members are trying to influence the direction in a positive way for the soccer community in Southern California. So still outstanding. We still have several items here that I've been reporting for the past couple of years. Some of these things are in various stages of progress. Other things are nowhere near as far as we'd like them to be. But, you know, the web page is something you guys interact with all the time. It is definitely in need of a rewrite, and it's something on our list of things to do. You know, implementing the referee mentorship program that George talked about. These guys, it's like changing tires when you're on the racetrack, right? They're still moving, and we still want to try and continually improve those programs, as well as, you know, the coaching blueprint and so on. So these things, some of them will be ongoing projects. Others are things that we need to wrap up and bring to completion. And these are the items that I've been reporting on, and I'm hoping that we can bring them to fruition. And we'd love to get your feedback on them if they are items that are still important to you. And if not, if priorities shifted, then we can certainly shift our priorities as well. Our membership numbers this year, we're down a little bit, small percentage, about around 3% on average if you look at it. And part of that might be explained in terms of on the adult side, we were able to promote some of our Cal South membership into a regional or a national league structure. And at that point, they ceased to become Cal South members. They were part of the National Association. That's going to actually change next year. There is a policy in front of U.S. Adult Soccer where they're considering all of these national league and regional leagues that they would capture that information and return those numbers back to the states. That was one of the things that I had asked for personally when we lost one of our large adult leagues last year. We don't want to hold people back. If they have an opportunity to grow forward and move ahead, then that's a great thing. But at the same time, we do depend on these membership numbers in terms of how our voting structure is and in terms of some of the funding that comes back to the state association. On the youth side, it's a little bit more ambiguous, and I'm not exactly sure where those numbers shake out yet, but this was all as of Friday. So a little bit about the vision. I'm going to buzz through this real quick because many of you that have been here have already seen this presentation over the last couple of years, but it's basically focused around the board of directors providing a foundational support for our staff to provide service to our customers. It's a very simple idea. If we can provide support to the staff, and then the staff can provide support to you, our customers. We do that through building blocks like leadership development, providing the technology solutions that are needed in order to effectively deliver services, generating staff excellence through training and promotion of talent through the organization, and resulting in member service at the top. Bottom line is you as our customers are at the top of the list. You're at the top of the pyramid. So technology solution, we've already talked about the website, increasing e-commerce capabilities, and adding a knowledge base. So I'll just very briefly touch on the knowledge base. I've heard from members for the last couple, 3 years that quite often you just like to know how to do something. And where can you go to get that information? It's too spread out. There's too many places that you have to research. It would be so much more effective if you can go into a knowledge-based type of arrangement and ask a specific question and get an answer to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So that's something that we need to move forward with. The mobility, as you know, I mean, by the time we get this, it might be beyond mobility at that point. But right now, mobility is still hot, and everyone here probably has a handheld computer known as a smartphone, and we need to be able to make our resources available at that handheld level. So it's something still very important to us. Our technology partners have made progress in this area. It's a matter of us leveraging those partners to deliver that service to you. An organizational dashboard. So many of you have been the recipients of correspondence and phone calls recently about the status of your organization. Hey, you owe money. Hey, you don't have enough teams. You know, your good standing is in jeopardy. We need to somehow address that. So the idea here is to give you a dashboard that you can go to as a member of CalSouth, where you can bring up a screen and know, okay, CalSouth has me this many registered players. This is my balance. Here's my account, and how you know, I owe money for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the case is. So in other words, something that tells you as a representative of your league or club where you sit with CalSouth. It's a very simple approach, and it's something that we really need to do. Finally, leadership development. So many of you are in leadership roles here, and you know, the idea is, well, how did you get there, and what are we doing to support you now that you're there? What did we do to help you prepare for these roles that you're in? And one idea is to deliver a program that can provide you some training. And we had a program. We're trying to retool it now and maybe come up with another solution where we can deliver that type of training. But many of you felt that this was a valuable offering, and we hopefully will come up with a way to deliver that back to you. Okay, so you know, the vision about how we get there, again, staff excellence, you know, bring on the top talent to work with you, you know, provide the training that they need, extend those service hours so you can get the service you need when you need it. So we run an office, you know, from 8 to 6 now. I think it's extended by about an hour a day. But many of you don't get home from work to start working on soccer business until 5 or 6. So we want to have a way for you to be able to pick up the phone or send an email and get support after hours. So this is something that we're still trying to address with staff so that this will be available to you. We need to improve our communications in every possible way, including all kinds of non-traditional forms of communication. So traditional was maybe an email, maybe a phone call, you know, face-to-face meeting. I mean, how many people communicate only that way? Hardly anyone, right? I mean, people are using Facebook, so we've got the Facebook presence. Some of you use Instagram now, and you're getting a lot of information there. We need to have ways to get information to you and from you when it's needed. And finally, you know, to develop the necessary infrastructure to support the future needs of the association. So what we're saying here is we've got to look forward. We've got to go out, you know, 3, 5, 10 years and say, what is it we need to build now in order to support you in the future? If we wait, you know, for 5 years to figure that out, then we're behind the 8 ball. So this is a way of getting out ahead of it. Board of directors, you know, we're very, very fortunate. We have a very active board of directors. They come right from your communities. They are your representatives, and they're always available to you. Reach out to them through email, through phone call, through any way that you communicate. There are some league meetings where every meeting of that league, we have board members there. So, you know, please, if you would like board members to attend your club meetings, your league meetings, reach out to us. We will come. If you give us enough time, I'll be there myself, okay? You know, the bottom line here is as a board of directors, we need to be forward-thinking. We need to be engaged with our members. We need to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, not just now, but in the future. And the best way to do that is to be fully engaged with you. Now, I'm going to leave it with this one here. This is kind of a different way of looking at things, and I'd liken it to, in the past, the way that we kind of looked at ourselves, I believe, and this would be not just Cal South, this would be U.S. Soccer, and I had this conversation with Pablo. It would be U.S. Youth Soccer, most definitely, and it would probably even be your clubs. And what it is because in the past, we were maybe the only opportunity, right? There was no competition. There was no U.S. club. You know, ASO focused on younger recreational program. We focused on everything else, and we were the only game. Everybody came to us, our members, you guys, right? So we viewed ourselves as a destination. We viewed ourselves as a place where people came to play soccer. In the past, I heard things like, well, and not from any of you, but they need us to play soccer. I've actually heard that in a meeting, a regional meeting with some folks. And my response was, no, they don't. They don't need us to play soccer. People are playing soccer out there every single day of the week, and they don't need anyone to help organize it. All they need is a ball and some grass, right? So we have to change our thinking and the way we look at ourselves. And I would say that the way we look at ourselves, we should look at ourselves as not being a destination, but being more of a transportation center, a transportation hub. And the reason why is because everyone that comes to us, they're on the move. They're going somewhere. Everyone. If it's a young kid that is being introduced to the game, they want to learn the game. They want to go on. Maybe they just want to play for fun. Maybe they want to get better. They want to play on the national team, perhaps. The fact is that whether they're a referee, a coach, or a player, they are on the move. They're going somewhere. And therefore, we need to look at ourselves differently and become facilitators of the journey. We have to stop thinking of ourselves as being the destination where people come and we're going to hold on to them. And we're going to keep them there. And because that mentality changes our way of thinking, and when they leave us, we get very hurt and offended by that. And we think there's a loss. And what I'm saying is that they're on the move, they're going to move on. When they do, let's help them get there, and let's be proud of what they accomplish. And guess what? Every day, more will come. Think about your trip here. I think most everyone drove to this event, okay? But when you travel outside of Southern California, you have a lot of choices for airports, train stations, buses, cars, whatever. You tend to avoid the ones that are, you know, very troublesome and difficult. And the ones that provide you service, they get you to where you want to go with as little pain as possible, those are the ones you continue to frequent. So if we think of ourselves that way, then I think we'll be more successful. So, you know, I started thinking, what are the models that exist in the industry? And right away, the one that came to mind was universities. Universities are facilitators of a journey. People go to a university, they're going somewhere. Prospects become students, students become alumni. Sometimes they stay, they become professors, and they stay there forever. But a lot of times they go on to other universities or they go on to their careers. And the fact is you want to help those people reach their journey because then they become very loyal alumni and they give back. So that's my message for you today. And at this point in time, what I'd like to hear from is from you. I'd like to open it up for a few minutes and ask you if you have any questions, comments. You know, we did a lot of things this last year. Some of it we did well. Some of it was a challenge. You know, this new concussion law really kind of think bit us in the tail. But we're here to learn from our experiences and move forward. So at this point in time, we've got a few minutes. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
So going with the concussion thing, on my rec side, I have a bunch of Spanish speaking. I know they finally translated it into Spanish, but I'm having problems even on my rec side where faxing the papers in, it's not being processed. Is there streamlining, or what's going to be the process going forward? Because my rec league's getting ready to begin, trying to get all this so we can be active by the September 9th date.
Yes, so that's a great question. So the question is around the process. We have a recreational program that's trying to be up and running by the September 9th date, and there's been a lot of Spanish speakers, and it sounds like they don't have online access is the point you're trying to make. So what are we doing about online access or about people that don't have online access? Now, it's my understanding, and Steve Marquez in the audience, yes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for those that do not have that online access, we're able to accept paperwork that's been signed by the parent through the registrar, correct?
Well, no, we actually have to submit it to the office.
Oh, it has to come to the Cal South office. Ah, okay.
We're faxing it to you, and like we turned in some like 2 weeks ago, and it still hasn't been processed.
How does the member know when the faxed paperwork has been processed? Do we send them an alert, or do we have a backlog right now?
I don't know what that backlog is, if there's any, and I know we processed over 1,000.
Okay, so it's a big number. We've processed over 1,000. Is Johnny in the room? Johnny? Yeah. Who? Adrian. Oh, okay. Yeah, Adrian, would you please?
Thanks, Eric. So our target's 160,000 is what we're expecting to do this season. We're at 81,000 right now, so we're halfway there. The office itself has processed over 2,000.
Facilitate and administer a requirement that is a legislative requirement that is bestowed upon us as a youth organization, and candidly for all of you who represent youth organizations as well. It's outlined in Assembly Bill 2007, which went effective January 1 of 2017. So currently we're obviously not fully compliant with that, as many of you are not either. So we rolled that whole endeavor or that effort out. I think it was just the end of May, first part of June, and we've been working through the summer to try to get to that 160,000 that Adrian mentioned. Originally, our position was no, we had to have that directly from the parent so that we could meet the obligation that's bestowed upon us by the legislation, which will also include some form of auditing from the state, although we don't know how or we haven't seen that. But we have to be able to answer the question, has this parent, pick a name, completed this process and demonstrate that they've done that. But since then, since the implementation, we have been working with the affiliates and their registrars to allow them to do exactly what you're saying, kind of facilitate and have their own internal process. And as certified registrars, they are essentially notifying us, informing us that they have met the requirement. Now, it may be a little bit of a loose compliance or you know, meeting the requirement, but given the magnitude of what we're looking at and the implementation and the short timeline that we had to prepare for the fall season, we felt like this was appropriate and at least got us moving in the right direction. Whether we'll get to the 160,000 or not, remains to be seen, but we are working with all the registrars who are certified registrars. And essentially, it's a trust relationship that we have with those registrars that they have, they're acknowledging that they meet the requirement. Now, should we come back to a league or an affiliate and say, hey, we need to audit that, we need to see maybe some just random audits to make sure that that has occurred, yeah, that's probably would be within our purview and maybe even a requirement of the state. But we are working with the registrars to do that.
Well, our registrar is our registrar for the club side and the rec side.
Okay.
And she's not aware of the fact that she can do that. And she's been a registrar for more than a couple of years.
Okay, so let's make sure we connect you with Adrian before you leave, and we'll follow up on that, or anyone else that has that as well, because we did accommodate this process after we originally rolled out the notification. So it's been kind of a work in progress as we've worked to, accomplish the task at hand. But the real, I think, point here to make for everyone, and you heard it with Dr. Allen's commentary, this whole issue of concussions is not going to go away. It's going to stay with us. In fact, I suspect there will be more requirements, and at Cal South, we will continue to refine our policy. I think we all agree, I think pretty much at Cal South, that the way we're doing it right now is cumbersome. It's difficult at best. We have to find a more streamlined process, figure out a way to leverage technology. I'm of the opinion that this is best managed at the point of entry, rather than trying to do it in the rears, which is kind of what we've been doing this year. But we'll figure that out, and your input is critical in that whole process to help us refine not only our policy, but our procedures to get it done. But we are not shying away from the obligation that we have. It's almost essentially, as you heard in other discussion points, it's a mandate from the state, and we're doing our best to comply with it. And we appreciate everybody else's patience and efforts as well as you work with us to do that.
Don't want you to get me wrong. I'm in full support of the concussions. I just wanted to make the process simpler.
Agree. So his comment was, he's in full support of the effort and the spirit behind it, but he'd like to see the process be a little better, a little more streamlined, and we agree with that. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. Yes, we do agree with that, and I know the Board of Directors is very supportive of that idea. It's not our job to make things harder for you. So we definitely want to make things easier. Johnny has a point. It should be done at the point of entry rather than in arrears. I think our registrars do provide us a network that gives us that capability, at least in the short term. Maybe the future is going to look differently, and perhaps it should. Yes, sir. Okay, so the question was, is there any way we can certify someone to come out and give a presentation and certify everyone at once? And I believe the answer to that is no, because there's a requirement that the individual, so first of all, there's a few requirements. One is the parent has to acknowledge. That's the California law. That's the AB 2007 that Johnny mentioned. But then as far as the individual, the coaches and so on, gaining that certification, they actually have to go online. Each one of them has to do it. So sending somebody out to do them all at once, like in mass, I don't think that solves that. I think each one of them has to get online and do that, take that course. You know, we talked about that. Originally it was going to be an annual thing, but we got some relief on that, didn't we, Johnny?
The notification for parents is an annual requirement. That's part of the legislation. The concussion education awareness, the CDC training that coaches and administrators take, we at one point had required that to be annual, but we backed away from that. You only have to complete that once. The Federation, to give them a little plug here, in the coaching curriculum, you're seeing they are incorporating concussion awareness and education in all of the curriculum. Originally, they did not have that at the F license level. That's being sunset, as you heard earlier from Rick's presentation, but they will continue to emphasize the importance of concussion awareness and training. So for coaches, administrators, you have to complete it one time. That's our requirement today.
That's actually a huge relief, because I think the board will back me up on this. We were sitting in several meetings where they thought, my God, we have to do this every single year. Why? What's changed? I mean, has the human skull changed from year to year? So being able to do it one time is a big difference. Yes, James? No. No, as a matter of fact, we're not allowed to use your money to lobby for political reasons. But there is a I believe so. I think it's if you're going to be a nonprofit in California, you can't spend money that way. If we ever decided that lobbying would be a good thing for our members, which there could be a great argument for it, it could not be this group with this set of money. It would have to be a group established specifically for lobbying, and that would have to be fully disclosed. So in the U.S. Soccer family, the U.S. Soccer Foundation actually has lobbying capabilities. They work with lobbyists, if I'm not mistaken. They actually talk about that when we participate in events with the foundation. So Cal South is not a lobbying group. Anyone else? Bernie and then Bob.
Yeah, Derek, is there anything to report on the USYS meeting that was held? And also the talk about, Washington tried to break away from USYS and where that's going. Supposedly Cal South and 10 other states may want to work with the Federation and stuff like that.
Well, everyone wants to work with the Federation. There's a great desire to align with the Federation and be more in step with what the future of soccer looks like in the United States. I'm glad you asked the question about US Youth. I did want to report that to you. So we recently attended the annual general meeting of US Youth Soccer, where the bylaws were, there was 2 proposals, and the one presented by the Board of Directors changed the governance structure quite a bit. There used to be the national governing body and then 55 state associations that were organized by region, and each region had a council that controlled the budget, controlled policies, and basically worked either with each other or against each other, and with or against the national organization. And it was very dysfunctional. I'm very happy to report that the bylaw changes that remove the governance away from those 4 regions passed by a margin of 95% to 5, which none of us anticipated that it would pass by such an overwhelming margin. But I will say that the Cal South Board of Directors supported that bylaw change, and the Cal South Board of Directors that were in attendance all worked very hard to lobby with their fellow state associations to persuade people to support that bylaw change, and it worked. Because when we got there at the beginning of the week, there was a lot of people shaking their heads saying they would not support it, no way, no how. And we went to work. So what does this do for Cal South and the 10 states and Washington and so on? Well, Washington was very supportive of this, as we were. I think it gives us another chance of working together for a national association and the benefits that that could bring. And what I will say about that personally is that, look, U.S. Soccer, they're very focused on soccer in the United States. They're very focused on the national teams. They're focused on, having all the associations line up in a way that will direct the top talented kids to the Federation for the national teams, and perhaps to the MLS and so on. Making soccer a better experience in the country, serving the player, the athlete, and also serving the fan. But they're not a national youth advocacy group. So don't make that mistake, because that's not what they're there for. They have other things that they do. The only, well, I don't want to say the only, but let's say the largest youth soccer advocacy group in the country is U.S. Youth Soccer. And the better that they can function, and the better that they can work together, then hopefully the better it is for youth soccer across the country. So I'm very happy that U.S. Youth Soccer is got another shot at streamlining their operations and working together to better youth soccer in this country. So that's what happened in Frisco. Thank you for asking. Yes, Bob.
I have a question about, and I know there's a lot of board members here, about deactivating of teams without notifying us would be a good thing as a game late studio, and I suppose to all of us would it'd be a lot easier before you deactivate them, if you give us a chance to work with the club. We had 2 recently that were deactivated. How we found out was they're out of the system. Other people, there's scheduling and rescheduling going on, and nobody's really making any contact because they were locked out. I know when Weinert was here, when John was here, we had made a deal that they were going to give me a 30-day notice to help you guys do whatever it is. If you're out to punish the clubs, okay, great, but you're punishing a bunch of the other clubs, you're punishing everybody else to prove a point, I guess, or whatever it may be. Hey, screw you, we're just going to suspend you if you don't want to get your stuff done. But I think in some cases it's an issue with some billing, from what I understand, with one of my clubs. But if you let us know, I know the 2, I got a hold of them, within an hour or 2 they were done, they got it fixed, they really didn't know. We have a bigger hammer being so much closer. Is there a way that the board or the office or something can follow what they had said? John gave it 40, I wanted 30 days, John gave us 14 days notice before he would suspend anybody. That obviously didn't happen. It's a huge burden on the rest of the clubs, other than the clubs are trying to punish. Can you do, so I guess have a board meeting, can you guys talk about this and maybe get it so that we're sort of in the loop?
So let me try and answer at least parts of your question. The question was related to good standing of affiliate members. And when something goes wrong, whether it's a bill wasn't paid or the number of teams drops below the threshold or so on, when something happens where their good standing's been threatened, what is our process, and can we somehow work with our competitive leagues at least to inform them? And you mentioned that in the past you used to get 14 days notice, and you were very engaged in helping your club stay in good standing, which actually benefits everyone. So to answer that question, we have recently activated that process. Our staff is tuned it up, and they're working on review of every affiliate of Cal South. And they're reviewing for all those things I talked about on that dashboard that hopefully you'll be able to sign on and take a look at. So that's what they're doing now, and they have actually, we've had a couple of executive committee meetings where we review staff recommendations, and the staff is working with the affiliates to say, look, we need you to do this, we need you to solve this problem. In some cases, the affiliates have been very responsive and took care of it right away. In other cases, they were hard to reach, or maybe we couldn't get a hold of them at all. So unresponsive, I think, is the term that I would use. So how can we work better together in the future is your question. And I would just say that this 14-day notification that you used to receive, I'm not opposed to that. I think that having a good relationship with your district commissioner is a good start, because I think every DC is involved before it ever gets to that point. So I know I'm not giving you a full answer on that, but I would say that a relationship with the DC is a good start, and then a 14-day notification does not seem unreasonable if you were getting it before. Johnny, would you like to respond to that?
So, Bob, I think it obviously something the board can consider and discuss at the board level. The difficulty with what you're asking for is that per our bylaws, we really cannot subjugate another member's affiliation with Cal South to another member or through another member. We can't restrict that in any way. That membership relationship is theirs with us and ours with them. So if there's an issue that is driving a good standing requirement, we have an obligation to work with them and inform them. They have some entitlements, I guess I would say, within our bylaws to respond or be responsive and address those issues. And we, to Derek's point earlier, we've been working diligently through the last several months to bring that kind of, I guess, current, if you will. And I think we're just about there, right, Adrian? But to subjugate that, in other words, to hold it in abeyance or hold activities in abeyance while we vet it through another member, we really, I think that's difficult at best. I don't see how that would work for us. If it's a notification thing, and these affiliates have a relationship with you as a league, I would suspect that you guys have requirements of them as well. If there's some violation of that, then obviously you guys as leagues can address that. But from a membership point of view with Cal South, we have to work that directly with them. Now, the board can always address membership and bylaw changes and so forth if they choose to, but we would not work through another affiliate to try to address that or to get that affiliate sort of in line or compliance, if you will. I don't think I'm asking you to work through it. Okay. All right.
And you guys are just suspending without any knowledge. I called the office. We got that fixed. It was a bad check. It was a check issue with the bank. Some of the communication at one of the clubs said they never got any notification. It was sent to the old treasurer, who happens to be the president now. I got a hold of them because it shows up in the system that they're deactivated. They got to fix that fast. This wasn't an issue when I talked at that time with one club. Is when it came up and they said,
Okay. Well, I don't know the particulars on that. I'm happy to talk with you about that separately. I will tell you this, though. With regard to the good standing provisions, Adrian and our team have been working diligently. We notify leagues or affiliates monthly on their financial status, so they are well informed. They don't really get into what I would call harm's way until about 60 days into it, and we work with them through that process. The other requirements are done at different intervals. Sometimes they're done quarterly, sometimes they're done annually, sometimes they're done biannually. So we're putting a lot more effort into those reviews, and I think we're starting to gain some ground there, and most of our affiliates are very current at this point, and the few that we've had to address here over the last couple of months, we're, I think, at a place now where we're able to work through any of those outstanding issues. So our goal would be not to get into the situation that you're in, but at some point, every affiliate has an obligation and has a responsibility, whether it's to us if they affiliate with us or to the league that they sign up for. And we'll work with them as best we can. We do not want to impact the kids on game day or on the field. Obviously, we want to see kids playing. We want to see the game continue. But we will, we put a real honest effort into getting ahead of this and letting people know where they stand so they don't find themselves in a situation like that. So. Okay, well, I don't know the details, but yeah, there's always, you know, maybe a one-off here or there that would, but we're happy to work that. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. So, as you know, Bob, I think the important thing, thank you very much for bringing that up, is that we improve our communications. The tools like that dashboard would probably help. In the meantime, working with the DCs, I think would be a very good way to try and head some of that off. We will address the issue of communications at our next board meeting and how we can share and what we can share, you know, as far as, you know, putting teams or clubs in bad standing.
We've been very privileged to be able to use this venue every year for this summit event, and the Galaxy have been fantastic to work with, so our thanks to them. Also, thanks to our presenters. I'm going to run through them very quickly. Certainly George and his team to come up and talk about the referees, answer the questions. They will continue to be around for the remainder of the evening if you have additional questions. Our congratulations and another round of applause to Arturo Angeles for his selection to the Mexican Football Federation. And Dr. Allen, I don't want to, I'm not going to try the last name, but thank you so much for your message, for sharing your knowledge, the wealth of information, your experience with regard to traumatic brain injury and concussions itself. This is, as you said, and I guess an area that certainly is affecting us in the game, and one that we have a lot yet to learn. So we really are grateful for you to be here today. So thank you so much for that. And on behalf of all of us at Cal South, I want to thank Pablo Garcia from the Federation for coming out to touch on the U.S. Soccer Connect, what you're doing with the National Data Center, and where we're going with that. So thank you, Pablo, the Federation, for that. And you got to meet, or if you haven't yet, please take the time to meet our wonderful vendors and partners who have been supportive of Cal South, many of them for many, many years. Without them, we would not be as successful as we are. They are a big part of everything we do, a big part of our success as an organization, and we'd like to think also of your organizations as well. Please take a moment to go and visit with them, get your tickets filled out for the raffle that's coming later, but another round of applause for all of our partners and vendors who are here today with us. All right, and finally, I'll close by saying we had a number of staff here. We hope that you found them to be gracious, and that the process of getting registered for this event was somewhat painless. But I would be remiss if I did not thank Cindy and all of our staff for the effort that went into planning this, to pulling it off yet again. My thanks to all of you for your work today. And one more, these events have to be supported from a policy point of view, from a resource point of view. I cannot say enough about our board of directors and the amount of commitment that they demonstrate to supporting this organization at every single level, regardless of the program, regardless of the event. These things have to be resourced. They have to be part of our budget and annual planning process, and our board has always been very supportive of these events. So please give our board of directors a round of applause as well. All right. Blaine, I'll turn it back over to you.